This is The Great Outdoors with Jason White, exploring the great outdoors in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsman Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, The Great Outdoors with Jason White.
Hello friends, I'm Jason White. Welcome to The Great Outdoors. Happy to be here with you today. I have I think a very interesting conversation for you. I just got back from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau Annual Convention, and I have some updates from the discussed and voted on policies that hopefully influence positive change amongst the state and federal government. So I look to dive into this and give you a little bit of updates and information. But before I do, I would like to thank our sponsors, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. You can join the MOA today and get the rest of 2024 for free, along with a 2025 membership. Go to MarianaOutdoors.com. Again, MarianaOutdoors.com. 2.5 miles of private trout fishing, tons and tons of habitat improvements happening annually in regards to that fishery. Let's not forget about the 1,000-yard rifle range, 2 pistol ranges, practice clay pigeon range, and 3D archery. And, oh, geez, how could I miss this? Approximately 300 acres of upland bird hunting. Birds are stocked weekly, so if you're an avid outdoorsman, we would love to have you. Again, MarianaOutdoors.com, MarianaOutdoors.com. Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds, managed and operated by 10 Mile Creek Outfitters. If you're looking to book a white-tailed deer hunt, free range. If you're looking to book a spring turkey hunt, free range. If you're looking to book a fall, winter upland bird hunt, all of these are guided. Lodging's available. State laws apply. Again, no fence. Everything's free range. Love to have you. 10mileco.org. Again, TENMILECO.org, or give us a call at 724-579-0924. Back to the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Have some upcoming events. Just to put on your calendar. Friday, December the 13th, will be trout stocking number 4. Look forward to having everybody. We meet at 1997 Maury Road, Clarksville, Pennsylvania, 15322. Sunday, December 15th, we have a one-day members fly fishing tournament. Nothing too crazy. It's a one-day event. Got to have a fly pole to be in it. Happy to have everyone. It's from daylight. Starts at daylight. Information's on our Facebook page under the events section. Mariana Outdoorsman Association, and look for the 2024 Winter Fly Fishing Trout Tournament. Spring, May 2nd through May 4th. It's the second annual PA Trout Classic. 80 fishermen will come from across Pennsylvania, but also other states. It's a 2.5-day tournament. It's basically all day Friday, all day Saturday, and we will wrap things up at lunchtime, noon on Sunday. Look forward to seeing everybody. Again, information's on Mariana Outdoorsman Association at Facebook, or you can check us out at MarianaOutdoors.com. Looking ahead, or I shouldn't say looking ahead. I want to dive into some of these policies because I think anybody out there that's dealt with crop damage, or you have interest with the Pennsylvania Game Commission or CWD, going to hit on a bunch of little bullet points here. I'll talk about some of this stuff as quickly as I can and as much as I can. But, all right, so we have a policy here that passed, discusses that the PA Game Commission, we recommend that the PA Game Commission create a rigid culling program in areas of high population of deer causing crop damage, as well as a path to control CWD. Similar programs, obviously everything I'm telling you is not law. These are basically statewide voted on policies recommended by PA Farm Bureau members. I just want to premise with that. But this particular policy is based off of protocols and procedures that are implemented by other states and has actually helped with CWD. For those following CWD in general, it has astronomically kind of ballooned, become a major problem in, I would say, south central Pennsylvania, and it's slowly kind of expanding. They don't have, I would say, rapid testing on site. Basically, a deer has to be harvested and killed, and then it takes typically 7 days for that whole testing process to be turned around. So what they found in other states was just trying to really knock back deer population numbers, and the healthy deer repopulating. It seems to have been a helpful thing. What I will say about this, culling, culling, is basically when you would shoot, harvest a large quantity of animals in a particular area due to high population. What's important to note on this wouldn't be a practice that would be implemented in places where population numbers are healthy or what are adequate for or recommended by biologists and medical, or I would say environmental experts, conservation experts. The idea of culling would never be utilized in a normal scenario. These would be when you have an outbreak of disease or an extreme outbreak of property damages caused by excessive wildlife. And in many parts of Pennsylvania, this has become a problem. Certainly, wildlife needs to be managed and managed properly and adequately. It's a shame that we even have to talk about this with outbreaks of extensive property damage to the point where people are almost going bankrupt. So, certainly, a culling program on a base-by-base need or a specific need is certainly something that would be nice to have as an available option. Clearly, that's kind of like a worst-case scenario option, but certainly an option nonetheless. The next one. We recommend the Pennsylvania Game Commission must adequately provide resolutions to all landowners / leaseholders with the ability to adequately prevent and or address property damage caused by wildlife. This is kind of cut and dry. One would think it doesn't need to be written down, but certainly the Pennsylvania Game Commission is responsible for wildlife in the state of Pennsylvania. And despite who you are, where you live, what your situation is, if you have an issue with property damage caused by wildlife, the Pennsylvania Game Commission should have a solution, whether that's innovative or common sense, to help address your problem and prevent it in the future. So think about that. But that's what the Game Commission is supposed to be there for, not only to manage wildlife, but if wildlife is obviously negatively impacting humans, that those issues can be addressed and rectified. Sad that we have to put a vote on something like this and put it on paper, but it is what it is. We recommend mortality composting or on-site burial to be allowed. Disposal methods for wildlife removed due to crop damage. I'm actually a huge proponent of this. I think this makes a lot of sense. There's a couple things I'd like to highlight that kind of stem off of this. So farmers that do want to address deer from crop damage, if you really go and dive into a lot of those programs, predominantly, they are not allowed to keep the meat. I believe there's one instance where you're allowed to keep one or a very small number of deer, but to shoot deer and to butcher it yourself, give it away to friends and family, that kind of stuff, is basically not common practice. And I think that's a shame. I think that's completely ridiculous in my opinion. But I digress. The problem is, with a lot of these deer, what ends up happening is even if you do utilize said programs and you call the Game Commission and it's 90 degrees in the summer, by the time the Game Commission even gets there, in many capacities and many times, the deer has already basically spoiled. So basically the deer is then taken to a dumpster, into a landfill, and disposed of, to which even in a very, very, very extreme worst case scenario that if, say, someone wasn't able to utilize the meat, farmers always predominantly utilize their compost piles or manure piles for the disposal of deceased farm animals. I do this all the time with pheasants, any deer carcasses that we harvest during regular deer season, and after we remove the meat, those deer end up going into our compost piles. So just food for thought for you. This is a common practice in agriculture. It would be a huge, I would say, a helpful tool. And, there's no farmer out there who wants to waste an animal and also waste the opportunity to put that animal back in as nutrition for the fields. So I think it's a crying shame that meat would not only be wasted, but also the animal as a whole then be taken to a landfill. I think it's just utterly ridiculous. So this is another, I think, common sense idea that needs to be adopted and accepted by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We recommend hay be considered a harvestable crop for wildlife damage control. Another one, hard to believe that I have to write it down and vote on it, but hay is absolutely a crop. Hay is what is necessary to feed the agricultural animals and produce that, then end up producing, whether that's milk, whether that's your bacon, whether that's your pork butts, whether that's your milk, cheeses, etc. Hayfields being decimated by crop damage is a huge concern. So certainly, this is another one that I think is clearly common sense, but sadly, kind of in the past has gone a little bit ignored. And hopefully this can be a change for the future. This next one came right out of Fayette County. I'm very proud of this one. We recommend a minimum of 50% of revenue generated by natural resources at game lands must stay within that property and county as to which they were extracted, harvested, leased, etc. So let me give you an example of this. For example, Fayette County, Washington County, Greene County, etc., here in southwestern Pennsylvania. Let's say you have a game lands. I do not care if that game lands has gas wells, if they timber the property. Let's say they sell some hay off of the property. Doesn't matter. Whatever natural resource monies are obtained and brought in from that property, this policy simply states that there would be a mandatory fiscal and financial responsibility that 50% of that revenue must stay combined within that property and or county. What would that look like? Well, I'll give you some examples. That could be habitat improvement. That could be equipment rental. That could be bringing in contractors to do work on the property. That could be buying seed at local aggregate stores to then plant the fields at the game lands. That could be paying a contractor, maybe that's a farmer, obviously, to come in locally and plant the fields for wildlife. Maybe that involves buying trees from local stores within that county to then plant on said property to help with the wildlife with habitat. Maybe you need to do some brush hogging or some real industrial application stuff, and we need to rent some equipment. Rent it local. Maybe we need to buy fuel for that equipment. Buy it local. The basic financial conversation here is that there's no rails that are up for the Game Commission as far as what they're taking out of those properties, what is coming in at those counties, and then ultimately what is leaving and going into the Game Commission's general fund. So this is kind of giving them some rails as to, yes, we would like to see the money stay in that county. And I also want to mention that 50% could be educational programs in schools. That could be things done at local hunting and fishing clubs. There's really nothing, we're just simply saying that whatever comes out of that county, some of that, at least 50% of that money needs to stay in the local economy. Taking money out of the county and putting it into Harrisburg is not helping not only the game lands, but it's not helping the sport and the conservation idea of the great outdoors and the mission statement of the Game Commission. So this is a very important topic. I really hope everybody, if you ever have the chance, go look at a balance sheet of what the Game Commission, brings in and so on and so forth. But but it's this one here to me is a huge idea. And I really hope people like, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of what what we're discussing here. So like theoretically, it was like $394 million that was brought in from these types of natural resources. So think about that. If half the money could have stayed within those properties, counties, etc., that's a lot of money that's going back into the local economy, which in turn is actually helping to tackle inflation as well. Because in lieu of us just continually taking and pumping it into Harrisburg or into some bank account that the general public does not see a benefit, is just another thing for people to be aware of. Moving on. We recommend an independent study of the deer population to recommend the number of deer per square mile that the habitat can sustain without damage. There's already been, so I think this is like really interesting. So there's already like scientific studies that say what is recommended per square mile in regards to sustainable deer populations for habitat. Excuse me. That being said, the number is approximately 6. And I was at a conference last summer, and the number is closer to 25 to 26 here in the state of Pennsylvania. This is clearly a huge problem. The Game Commission's well aware of it. They know about it. I firmly believe that we do need some type of better data gathering techniques here in the state. I feel that a lot of this is poor math. It's not a slap in anybody's face. It's just, when you talk to certain people in the Game Commission, they would say that their management practices and the way that they're calculating population densities, etc., that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Don't tell that to the person that's, closing down their farm because they're overrun with deer. People that are seeing black vultures that are killing their baby lambs and cows. And I can go on and on and on with the different wildlife issues that exist. But I would highly question, and putting it kindly, the population densities of wildlife here in the state. I firmly feel the Game Commission does not have their hands truly around that. Problematic at best, but it's bad. I really think a study, and I don't know that it needs to be a study per se. It needs to be better data gathering techniques, incorporating the public. We passed a policy last year about incorporating like better, how do I want to say this, voluntary check stations, to where you don't have to do them, but like to try to give people more opportunities to check in wildlife, etc., to just help get better data numbers, and ultimately that gives you the conservation numbers that you need to determine bag limits. So just food for thought. We recommend that the Pennsylvania Game Commission establish deer sharpshooter teams for the deer population control and removal. So I mentioned the first topic that I brought up was about a culling program. This would basically be hooked at the hip, I would say, with that. Currently, say you're a farmer and you're saying, hey, I have an astronomical problem with deer. Basically, an assessment could be had by the Game Commission, theoretically, and you could hopefully have either paid shooters or Game Commission employees come out and address the problem. That way, there are not as many, I would say, hoops to jump through. You have government employees then that would be, or contractors that would be addressing said problems. Other states have this. It does exist. I firmly feel that the federal government, as opposed to dumping all this money into all these other countries for, studying how climate change impacts taxi drivers in Ghana, or whatever crazy studies are out there around the world from our tax dollars. I firmly feel that we should find out better mechanisms just like this that we could incorporate to help with wildlife management. Food for thought, and if you really want to dive into some of the stuff that's spent around the world, your head might spin. That comes out of our tax dollars. So I think that's a critical piece of the puzzle for us all to know and consider. But at the end of the day, trying to get money to come back to address our collective problems here in the Commonwealth is what we're trying to achieve. Next one I wanted to move to is we recommend the Pennsylvania Game Commission seek delegated authority for control of migratory birds that are no longer listed as federally endangered. This also came out of Fayette County. Currently, there's what's called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It's a federal piece of federal law. But basically, the idea and concept here is if you are a farmer and dealing with migratory bird property damages, basically, the way it is right now, you have to deal with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, USDA, and you have to deal with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. To me, that is a crazy process. I've dealt with it personally. When they talk about red tape, it is layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. Again, the recommendation here is if animals are not listed as endangered, so they are theoretically in high populations, high pockets, etc., that authority should be then delegated to the state. So here in Pennsylvania, that would be the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So instead of dealing with USDA and also U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the theory would be to directly deal with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So again, seems like common sense, but when they talk about red tape and bureaucracy, this current process is certainly, I would say, lackluster at best. But I digress. The next one, it was actually Policy 190 within our annual delegate book. We recommend the Pennsylvania Game Commission seek delegated authority to control federally protected species. I think this is an interesting piece. I do not see why it's unfathomable or not achievable. The Game Commission is more than capable of managing species, even if they are federally endangered. So, I mean, I don't see a reason or an issue with that. But being that they're delegated in so many other capacities, I can't stress it enough. U.S. Fish and Wildlife does nothing. They're not here with employees and workers and going out and inspecting things, so on and so forth. That does not happen. Does not happen, and it's definitely a very convoluted process. They are basically a layer of what I would say extreme bureaucracy. So, any way to streamline it for people while obviously maintaining wildlife numbers, managing wildlife populations, etc., and doing what we need to do to keep Pennsylvania efficient, effective, and obviously moving in the right direction. I don't see the issue at all. Next one, this also came out of Fayette County. We recommend the Pennsylvania Game Commission should compensate butchers for space used for holding deer carcasses on site for research, testing, etc. Another thing that takes place right now is a lot of butchers basically take the deer heads after they've been butchered and processed, and they'll put them into these barrels, drums, containers, etc. Basically, they're stored on site on somebody's property for the Game Commission to then show up, and they will age the deer based upon the size of the teeth or the age of the teeth. This might strike you a little bit odd, but the current payment method for them doing this is they give every butcher a shirt, or excuse me, a shirt. They give every butcher a hat and a calendar. To me, I can't even believe that this is real. It is rather insane, actually. But it also leads one to believe that whoever come up with said idea probably never ran a business or never started a business or really wasn't in the private sector much at all, because you're not going to pay for your bills with a hat and a calendar. So with as much profit margin as the Game Commission has, and in their their budgets, I'm sorry, but compensate these people for utilization of their property, rented space, and fair market value for said space. And last but not least, these people are providing these deer skulls that are ultimately going towards data for conservation. So, they're kind of like scientists, is the best way to describe it, but they certainly deserve to be compensated fair market value for their space being utilized and rented for scientific reasons within the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I'm sorry, but a hat and a calendar is a joke. I can't even believe I've talked about it. Like, that to me is just insane. So, I hope that there's, everybody wakes up to, like, well, why are butchers not, like, continuing to operate? Well, they're getting paid with a hat and calendar by the Game Commission. Like, what a compensation. Please sign me up. Actually, no, don't sign me up. I think that's a joke. A hat and calendar is terrible and immediately needs to be rectified. This is in my opinion, a high profile target, again, to put money back into the counties, for the the services and the conservation efforts, of our butchers. The next one, this is being done in other states. I think it's very interesting. I can't speak to it wholeheartedly, but we recommend that there be no restriction on using contraception for wild animal population control. I do not know the logistics of this. I'm going to assume that this would be like almost like a dart, like a shot, an injection type situation. So I would assume you'd almost have to shoot a deer with like a dart or a blowgun or something like those lines, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it would be some contraceptive, basically, to make the animal sterile. Theoretically, I think it certainly works. It would work. I would say I can't really speak to it in major detail. There's a lot of questions I have about it. Just like I'm saying, I would assume it's going to be some type of an injection. I can't imagine that they would do something or approve something that would be oral, because then potentially other species could digest that and also they then become sterile. So to me, this would be like a step down from culling the deer. So you're not actually killing them, but you're basically giving them some form of birth control. I think the ultimate thing that I will say about this whole deer problem is, if you start right out of the gate, the data collection methods, the methodology, how things are managed there, I said it earlier, questionable at best. Clearly, if there are all these ideas and thoughts about management of deer, clearly we do not have our hands around the populations. So I think that's problem number one. Problem number two is, these folks are trying to even come up with humane ways of managing deer populations. So, you start off with the data collection of what we have, which we really don't have good data, and you start off at the very end where people have these now these ideas of contraceptives. We have the ideas of culling deer, sharpshooters, and then you have all the programs in between. I really strongly feel that the data coming in is not good. I think it's poor. I feel like the programs need a total overhaul. There's a lot of good ideas out there. For example, the summertime red tags with farmers, or crop damage tags. In theory, great idea. They can't keep the meat. Terrible idea. They can't use it for compost in their manure piles. Terrible idea. These are negatives right now that are hurting these programs. The idea to donate it to a food bank. In theory, that's a good idea. But on the same token, well, who's going to pay for it? Did you know right now the Game Commission has these programs and they're not funding them? So this upcoming year, those particular programs that we're talking about, crop damage and red tag, during the summer months, those programs will be unfunded. So what does that mean? Well, that theoretically means that we then need to amend the DMAP program, which is Deer Management Assistance Program during normal hunting season. You either need to up those numbers, or yes, you have to then have the Game Commission come in and do some type of a culling program, and also maybe more tags based more regionally. I know the Game Commission advocates for the wildlife management units. I have not seen any data to support their existence, let alone their efficiency or effectiveness. In my opinion, wildlife in this state has drastically been handled negatively after the WMUs were implemented. I know there's people out there that are in the bureaucracy that would argue that. I've not had anybody give me an argument that was intelligent on this topic. It's just been more of an emotional thing that, oh, they're better. Well, can you give me any facts or data or show me how things are better? I mean, I'm happy to have that discussion, but like, how's it better? Are they better? Because I feel like as time has progressed here, the crop damage has gotten worse, hunters declining, people getting into the outdoors declining. The list goes on, and we're talking about all these different problems. I'm a firm believer the wildlife management units are not an effective tool. From a data and analytics perspective, having these units that cover, in some capacity, some can be 6 to 9 counties in size. When you look at things realistically, having data within the county borders itself gives you more data points, gives you better data. Because ultimately, let's use 2A as an example, which touches Zone 2A, which touches part of Fayette County and into Washington, Greene, so on and so forth, up past Allegheny County. Point being, if we need to get more tags into a defined area, let's say a part of Washington County, let's say a section of Greene, the current practices do not allow that. Basically, the tags have to then be sold over a giant area. To me, that is problematic. That is not effective. That's rather inefficient, in my opinion. So, food for thought when you really look at all these deer management practices and how things are being handled. It goes to say that, I don't think we're really doing the best job when it comes to managing the wildlife herds and flocks here in the Commonwealth. Moving on, the next one. We recommend Pennsylvania Game Commission lands be managed for deer management and retention. Again, this just goes back to highlighting the fact that the game lands are lackluster at best when it comes to habitat management, when it comes to their overall management. A game land is supposed to be for people to have a really good chance publicly to harvest game. They are not meant to be state forests. If they were meant to be state forests, they would be state forests. They're game lands. They're there for the game that can be harvested within this Commonwealth. That is their function. That is their purpose. They are not wildlife refuge areas. They are not forests. They are not sanctuaries. They are game lands. So when I hear any scenario that we want to talk about that, oh, well, there's whatever, 400 and some, 500 some species of animals in the state of Pennsylvania. Appreciate that. And then those animals have free range in a multitude of spaces. Game lands is not what they're meant. That's not what that's meant for. That is meant for the specific species being plural, to be harvested, whether that's by a bow and arrow, whether that's by a firearm, whether that is by trapping. That is what the game lands are meant for, and that's how they should be managed. We've really gotten off track when it comes to our management practices and the ideologies there. I've heard conversations where the Game Commission will say, well, we now want it to be natural. Well, what is that? Pennsylvania has basically been terraformed with people, whether housing developments, businesses, communities, golf courses, football fields, baseball fields, etc. Everything we do as humans changes the landscape a little bit. But guess what? Wildlife adapts, and they live within those communities. Whether they're going through a housing development and eating everybody's bush plants and bushes around your landscaping, whether they're going on to a football or soccer field and eating, the grass on the field because it's nice and green, whether, you get Canadian geese that want to land on a golf course and have access to water and also all the greens and the fairways, etc. So you really got to think about like certain animals really enjoy and like certain things, and it certainly has become a great opportunity for all of us to see and witness, wildlife in our different areas, communities, etc., through the whole Commonwealth. But again, this policy highlights the fact that the Game Commission needs to do a better job of investing into the game lands for wildlife to be harvested, whether that's by bow and arrow, whether that is by firearm or trapping. This next one, it's an amendment to an existing policy, but I'll read the whole thing. It says wildlife management. It says, we recommend that the drone usage be allowed for animal search and recovery during hunting. Currently, the Game Commission does not allow this. I think things change. I would say technologies change. I don't see any reason that somebody cannot utilize a drone for the recovery and search of an animal. Clearly, I understand you should not be in the act of utilizing said drone to hunt and pursue an animal, but when you are in the act of recovery, I totally support the idea. I don't see an issue with it whatsoever. I think it makes sense. I think those are business opportunities for folks. There's a lot of people that do deer tracking, blood tracking, etc., with blood dogs throughout the state. Clearly, this is just another tool in the arsenal that people could have to help with tracking of their deer. Because not all places does everybody have access to somebody that has a blood dog. So just food for thought. And clearly, there are a lot of other things to be discussed with this, or FAA laws, federally. So this isn't just, somebody would have to be licensed. Somebody would have to be a business owner. This isn't like you're just going to take your normal drone from the local store and go out and be able to just fly it around. There are trespass rules with these things. You can't fly them on, somebody's property without, obviously, their consent. But again, great tool, great opportunity. I think it's something we should look at to explore in the future. And I'm hopeful that the Game Commission will open the door up for this, because I just think it's a good opportunity, and I personally support it. That being said, I would like to wrap up by just again thanking our sponsors, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. You can join the MOA today at MarianaOutdoors.com. Again, MarianaOutdoors.com. If you join today, you get the rest of 2024 for free, along with a 2025 membership. Again, join today, MarianaOutdoors.com, or you can always give me a call at 724-579-0924. We're always doing tours and giving people private tours, etc., or you can do a group tour. Happy to show you around, show you everything that we have to offer, so on and so forth. Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds, managed by 10 Mile Creek Outfitters. I want to highlight the fact that we are now holding weddings, corporate events, parties, so on and so forth. We have an event venue, and we also have a space for a giant event tent, wedding tent, so on and so forth. So if you're interested in any of that, please give us a call, 724-579-0924, or you can go to 10mileco.org. Again, 10mileco.org. Deer hunts, turkey hunts, and upland bird hunts, also all available. Lodging, fantastic lodging, and amazing guides and amenities. I'm Jason White. This has been The Great Outdoors. Look forward to next week. You all enjoy the rest of your week. Hopefully we get some rain, and I'll talk to you soon.